All right, so this is the second half of the troubleshooting nested VMs internet connectivity issue. Here I have a test routing and remote access server built using the same template I used previously for the test DHCP network that we looked at in the previous video. Okay, so here I am connected to the test routing and remote access server. You can see here that I previously installed DHCP. I have it configured. We'll look at it in a second. Hyper-V has been installed. I have not yet created the internal NAT switch yet. IIS gets installed as part of the RRAS to allow for remote access. So I accepted the defaults for all of these items. So I still have some configuration work to do. I'm not worried about direct access or the VPN, so I will bring up this Getting Started wizard later and then cancel it. We aren't going to need that for the LAN routing portion. So we'll minimize this because we'll come back to it. Okay, so same deal on this server as the previous one. I use the 137.0 scope. Because once we do routing and remote access, just like internet connection sharing, it wants to give us a 137.1 gateway address in the 137.0/24 network. Okay, so let's take a look at what we have for NICs. We only have the one NIC so far because I haven't created the second NIC. Okay, so we're missing the second one. Let's go ahead and add that a while. Oh, before we close out of this, let's look at the properties. Same properties as the last server, 137.101 to 110. I don't ever anticipate needing more than 10 hosts or 10 virtual networks on this host, 10 virtual machines rather. Lease duration set for 31 days. I have previously populated the Quad 8 and Quad 9 DNS and the 137.1 gateway address. So the 168 address, that is the default number that's thrown in there. L-C.test, that's just the domain name I use in my classes. So DHCP has been configured, it has been authorized, and it will start handing out addresses hopefully shortly. So we'll create a new, again, we can call it whatever we want, but just for the sake of consistency, we'll call it internal NAT. Make sure it's internal. We're not using VLAN IDs. We'll click OK. The properties or settings for this VM, I haven't touched them yet. Okay, I pretty much do the same thing all the time. 2 gigs minimum, 4 gigs max. My cores, normally I'll set them to 2 if I'm using multiple VMs on the same host, but in this case, since I'm only using one, network will connect to this new internal NAT. Okay, and we'll get this thing connected and started. Okay, now while that boots up, okay, the nested VM will not get internet access at all. Okay, so Hyper-V has already been installed and configured. DHCP, routing and remote access has been installed, not yet configured. Oops. Let's ensure that our updates are current. Okay, I checked for updates last night, so we'll do it again. Now this VM, although it's taking a little bit to boot, should be pre-configured. I'm using the same virtual hard disk file that I was using for the other one. This I built on my computer at the house, did all the updates, then just copied the VHD file up into my OneDrive, and then manually downloaded it here. All right, so while that is set up, let me bring over the instructions we'll be using. Okay. So a Google search on how to enable internet connectivity for nested VMs. This is one of the search results. So we're going to use different addresses. Of course, we're going to use 192.168 addresses, but we're going to follow the instructions otherwise. The one thing that's different between this video and the last one is we're going to be installing routing and remote access, but we're only going to be using the LAN routing piece. Okay, so this walks you through doing this installation through PowerShell. I did it all through Server Manager. So we're going to skip past this. DHCP has already been configured. We're going to start here at configuring routing and remote access. Okay, so we're going to do a custom setup. So first things first, though, let's get signed in here. Oops. Okay, we'll give it a minute to boot up. Okay, 169 address. I think I made this change already, but let's double check. Okay, so the one thing I did forget to do that I just fixed in the control panel, once we added that second network card to Hyper-V, it shows up here, and we needed to configure its properties. So I did assign a static address, 137.1, which is the gateway that is assigned in DHCP. Once we did that, I'll answer yes to this to make this a private network, not a public network. Once we did that and hit OK and close, now I'm getting an address of 192.168.137. Now let's, again, the pings will probably fail because I haven't made any firewall changes. Let's try to ping the gateway. Okay, so we'll make a note to make the firewall changes. Okay, so we have that done. We have the updates done. Let's get Rras configured here. Okay, I must have tried to launch group policy by accident there. So let's get into the server manager here, and let's go to routing and remote access. Now, I'll get this kicked off, the getting started wizard, but we're going to close that straight away. Yeah, for what we're doing here, we only need LAN routing. So you can see it's disabled to this point. Now, this is the Microsoft preferred way. Instead of using internet connection sharing, we're not doing direct access or VPN, so I'm going to close that. All right, so we're going to get this set up by configuring. Okay, we're going to do a custom configuration because all we need is LAN routing. Okay, we'll start that service. All right, so once LAN routing is properly configured here, the service starts, and it shows here with this green arrow. So let's make the firewall changes because I want to be able to test the ability to ping. So we'll do that both for the host machine and for the nested VM. So again, same thing. I'm not even reading these rules. I just want to enable them all just for simplicity's sake. I always use advanced security. That gives me a lot more granular control. right, good stuff. I should be able to ping my LAN gateway, which is the second NIC on the host machine. I should be able to ping the primary NIC on the host machine, 10.0.0.4. This is set to private network, not public, which can be important for the security rules in the firewall. But I can't ping from the nested VM out. Now again, if this host machine were my own host machine on-prem or in Azure, I could fix this issue. But because I don't have ownership of this, not sure what type of control I have, I can putz around with RRAS. I can enable NAT. I can come in here and I can modify the properties. Potentially, I can set assigning IP addresses. I want it to use the DHCP server, but I can statically assign. These are troubleshooting steps I have not tested in the past. Because in the past, setting up routing and remote access on a Windows box with 2 NICs was as simple as I showed you. Right-click here, set up LAN routing only. It works up to the point where my nested VM on the 192 network can ping through its gateway to the secondary gateway, which is 10.0.0.4. And from the host machine itself, if I try to ping out to quad 8s, that's interesting. Okay, I would be surprised if Google was blocking pings to their DNS server, but let's try to go to the web. And this will fail utterly. And while that's trying to fail, let's try a different address. Let's try to trace route to quad 9s. Yeah, it can't get out. And if I run network diagnostics, it's going to tell me that it can't reach the gateway. Okay, so since I'm running that, here we'll pause this and come back once the trace route is done. Okay, so here the Windows Network Diagnostics finished. Broadband modem experiencing connectivity issues. Okay, well that doesn't help. Although I do know it's pointing to the host box. Whether it's pointing to the 192 interface or the 10 dot interface, I don't know. The troubleshooter doesn't give you that much detail. Trace route to quad 9s. It would fail automatically after 30 failed hops, and it was approaching that, so I just manually canceled it. I did decide, let's try to make a change. Let's do this. Okay. The default route statement is this top one. Okay, so I decided let's try to force all internet-bound traffic to this gateway using this interface. So the metric I tried to assign it a lower metric than 15. I use this command. Okay, so I try to set the metric forcibly to 5. Interface number was 17. So I get that here through GetNet adapter. It's the only NIC attached to this machine. So let's try a lower metric. Okay, so I'd have to remove the metric. So I do have it here. In fact, I'll try that. I'll remove this metric and see if I can forcibly send internet traffic out the 10.0.0.4 address. But you'll be able to see here, even with that route, if I ping quad 8s, still fails. All right, let me delete that route, re-add this metric, re-add this route with a lower metric, and we'll try again. Okay, so I deleted both the route I created and the default route, and then I added my own custom route to any undefined network, I want it to forcibly go out the 10.0.0.4 interface. So I gave it a metric. It really shouldn't matter because that should be the only route to take now. If I do my route print statement here, you can see I'm forcibly sending traffic to 0.4 out my interface. It assigned a metric of 25, even though I specifically told it 10, but I guess that's all right. My ping still fails. Okay, so following the Microsoft recommended practice of routing and remote access didn't work. Setting the DHCP without routing and remote access does work sporadically, but not nearly often enough. And it's impossible to troubleshoot because, like I said, it normally will work 1 to 2 reboots, but at most I've rebooted twice, and on the third logon, my nested VM has lost access to the internet. Here with routing and remote access, it never gets access to the internet to start.